Watches have an incredibly large range of prices, from under $50 to thousands and even millions in extreme cases. But what are you actually getting when you pay more for a watch? And is it even worth it? Today, I'll be comparing watches at $50, $500, and $5,000 price points. At these ranges, you'd expect massive differences, but in some categories, the gap is a lot smaller than you'd think, and in others, it's not even close. Let's start with the most visually striking of these categories, the aesthetics and build quality of a watch. Take a look at these three examples at roughly $50, $500, and $5,000 price points. Can you see a difference? For some finishing techniques, it's obvious, while with others, not so much. Brushing, for example, stays fairly consistent across all these tiers. It's a simple, accessible process for manufacturers, only requiring an abrasive and a unidirectional movement. But once you get into complex geometry and high polish, this changes completely. For $50, everything is kept as simple and cost-effective as possible. These are mass-manufactured watches, but with pre-existing tooling and minimal finishing. The $500 sees an improvement, with sharper lines, cleaner silhouettes, and actual polishing worth doing. Smaller details start to show themselves throughout the watch's construction. At $5,000, it's on an even higher level. Edges and machining are extremely precise, brushing is more uniform, and polishing becomes mirror-like. Tolerances are tighter, with little to no play in bracelets or end links. Every surface feels intentional, with significantly more craftsmanship than previous tiers. Hand finishing is also possible here too, but not very common. Most of the case details and intricacies are subtle though, especially if you're dealing with a fully brushed tool watch. With the movement, however, the difference is much more obvious. At $50, the primary concern here is for the watch to work. Movements are essentially unfinished, which is why you almost always see solid casebacks. As you move up, more care is put into the visuals of the movement, and you start to see basic decoration such as perlage and radial brushing. I consider this to be the bare minimum tier in movement finishing, that actually warrants a display caseback. At $5,000, movements begin to become works of art. Heat bluing, Geneva striping, hand engraving, frosting, and chamfering are all extremely common. This is where craftsmanship behind the decoration becomes part of the appeal, with brands such as Glashütte Original becoming famous for this. Dials follow this trend too. A lack of dimensionality and textures is the norm in lower tiers, printed indices and flat dials. At $500 and above, you start seeing applied and polished indices, intricate textures, and more details overall. The difference between $500 and $5,000 isn't always huge here though. It often comes down to refinement and actual execution. Grand Seiko is famous for this style, but even budget brands such as Citizen are doing similar work these days. Quality control also improves as you go up. Unaligned bezels and indices, manufacturing flaws, and inconsistent finish is way more common the more budget you go. Seiko is a rather infamous example of this, with common complaints of dial bezel misalignment. And finally, materials. Obviously, higher-end watches are going to have the edge. Gold case construction, for example, is an economic impossibility at lower tiers. Anything beyond stainless steel at $50 and $500 is usually plated, which wears over time, giving a horrible appearance. Only closer to $5,000 are watches with unique case materials such as gold, titanium, or bronze possible. Overall, $5,000 watches win in build quality and aesthetics, but usually through small improvements and an elevated appearance in every aspect. The $500 tier offers very strong value, often getting surprisingly close for a fraction of the price. Side by side, it'd likely be obvious which is better, but probably not 10 times better. The movement is likely the largest differentiating factor between different price tiers of watches. At $50, you're looking mostly at quartz, and maybe a low-end mechanical Miyota if you're lucky. This extreme budget space has had an expanding market over the last few years though, and we're seeing more and more Chinese homage brands managing to include low-end mechanical movements in their watches. Forget about any sort of reasonable accuracy, finishing, or complications at this level. Quartz movements are typically more accurate than mechanical, but at this price, even these aren't the best. For any amount of features here, you're best off looking into G-Shocks. Around $500, things open up a lot. You start seeing reliable mechanical movements, better specs, and a wide variety of complications. Entry-level Swiss brands with in-house movements such as Tissot, Longines, and Hamilton, and a plethora of micro-brands start to become an option. 3D power reserves, decent finishing, and even COSC certification show up here if you look hard enough. This is arguably the best value tier when it comes to movements. If I had to recommend someone unacquainted with a respectable mechanical watch, I'd point them to this tier. At the $5,000 middle luxury segment, movements are hitting their stride in diversity, quality, and craftsmanship. Unique movement types such as spring drive or high beats, as well as specialized designs like silicone hairsprings and free-sprung balances are available at this range. Finishing can be great as I mentioned before, and expect an accuracy certification of some kind at this price, whether it's METAS, COSC, or Master Chronometer. These are almost always in-house movements, or an extremely modified eBosch one if not. Mechanical chronographs are finally available in this range, in addition to the beginning levels of high horology complications such as tourbillons, chiming watches, and perpetual calendars, albeit sparsely for the price. This is also where diminishing returns really start to show, but it's probably the last price segment in the market you can make an argument for value in. Another aspect that is directly intertwined with the movement of a watch is its dimensions. Watch manufacturing is a constant battle between maximizing features and minimizing size. Counterintuitively, watches at the lower end of the price scale actually have some of the better measurements among their competition, because quartz movements take up less space. There's more to comfort than thickness and sizing though. At this level, bracelets are a weak point. Hair pulling, no micro adjustments, hollow end links, and a lack of refinement that makes them uncomfortable. I have a video over this exact topic on my channel already as well, so watch that one after this one if you haven't already. Moving into $500, these aspects flip on each other. Thickness often increases due to low-end mechanical movements, but comfort improves as well. Bracelet quality improves here too, with solid end links and comfort becoming more of a focus. Some micro brands are even starting to put micro adjustment into clasps at this price point too. At $5,000, you're getting the best of both worlds. Companies at this stage are putting a significant amount of R&D into movement, case, and bracelet development. Movements are developed with thickness and diameter explicitly in mind, utilizing advanced techniques like micro rotors, silicone escapements, and complication integration to minimize thickness. Outliers such as Tudor exist here, but often these watches are thinner, sleeker, and have a better thought-out wearing experience. Bracelets are refined to eliminate sharp edges and improve fit through beveling and better finishing. Micro adjustment and half links are also common. This is one area where the luxury category has a huge win over the others in comparison to price. If you enjoy this sort of analytical and deep dive content about watches, consider subscribing. I upload a new video every week on topics just like this. My favorite part of making these videos is interacting with all of you and discussing watches in the comments, watching this community grow. We just passed 300 and are working towards our next goal of reaching 500, and eventually getting partnered. Thanks. Durability is another paradoxical relationship across price tiers. If you want the most durable watch possible, again, you probably should just go with the G-Shock. Digital watches are always far more durable to shocks and sustained vibrations because of their lack of delicate mechanisms inside. For analog watches though, durability generally improves with price, if the watch was intended for rugged use. Around $50, watches from respectable brands are fairly durable, although don't expect them to survive very high of a fall. Less quality brands and certain homages can have serious issues here though. It's quite common to see indices break off, and for watches to just sort of fall apart from looking at them funny. Sapphire glass is not very common here either, so scratches on the crystal are a regular occurrence. As far as repairability goes, it doesn't. Watches here are essentially disposable from the perspective of the manufacturer, so don't even bother getting these fixed unless they have some high level of sentimentality. In the $500 tier, durability improves drastically. You can own a watch around this price for years without too much worry about damage. Shock absorption is an actual consideration, metal quality is generally higher, and sapphire crystals are common to see here as well. Movements can keep going for years, and outliers like Miyota and Seiko calibers seem to keep working almost indefinitely. Servicing is possible at this tier, depending on the watch. This is why the modified watch community sits around this range. The movement is often still disposable though, rather infamously so when it comes to brands such as Tissot and their Powermatic 80, which will replace completely when sent in for service. Moving towards $5,000, you start to see heirloom watches. Most watches here can last decades if cared for and regularly serviced. These watches do require maintenance though. These movements are designed to be maintained over time, which is going to cost more over the lifetime of ownership. In exchange, you're getting a piece of engineering made to last a lifetime. Beyond this, many brands optimize for durability here, and utilize tougher scratch-resistant metals, significant magnetically resistive case designs, and specialized temperature and shock-resistant movements. This is the only tier that I'd say rugged and durable mechanical movements are actually possible in, so far. There's a reason you hear about buying a Rolex to leave for the next generation, and not a Pagani design. A Rolex is capable of that, while a budget watch isn't. But obviously, there's an element of brand recognition and associated quality bundled with that too, which brings us directly into our next category. Many don't want to admit this, but a brand name alone can increase the cost and even perceived value of a watch significantly. Names like Cartier and Rolex carry a prestige tax. You're paying for brand recognition as much as the watch itself. The $30,000 used price for the Rolex Pepsi is unjustifiable otherwise. Everyone, enthusiasts or not, knows Rolex, and that perceived quality is enough for the asking price for them to rise accordingly. It's not all downsides though, as a rich brand history and esteemed reputation does contribute some actual value. You're getting quality assurance, long-term support, and stability from these established brands. Buying an Omega, you can be confident you'll be able to have that watch service for many years, because of that brand's staying power. You don't get the same confidence in, say, a Kickstarter microbrand with an in-house movement, as no one knows if they'll still exist in 10 years. Smaller and non-established names commonly compete in the $50 to $500 price range, so this is especially pertinent there. Another hidden cost is the price of marketing. Have you heard that the Speedmaster was the first watch on the moon? You better have, because the cost to tell everyone that fact is one reason why the Moonwatch is nearly 10 grand these days. There are benefits to this, however, as flagship models also have the R&D behind them to make them sell so well. Brands optimize every aspect of the design and wearing experience to be as desirable as possible. Meanwhile, smaller brands don't have the resources for marketing and the development of iterations as the industry giants do. They usually make up for this in other ways though, like over-delivering on specs for the price. The country of origin also matters. Swiss made still carries weight and contributes to the price. The consumer can actually benefit from this too, but by avoiding Swiss watches to achieve a better value. Countries outside of Switzerland lower their prices to compete accordingly, and as a result, you can find great pockets of value from Germany, China, Japan, and more. This is true at every price bracket, but around $500 is where comparable watches differ significantly in price based on origin. Originality is another aspect that plays a huge role in pricing. The original version of a design will almost always cost more than the alternatives or homages. There might be a million Submariner lookalikes on the budget market, but there's only one real Submariner. Brands spend a lot of time and money fueling this discourse, making consumers feel that anything besides theirs is a ripoff or alternative to the real thing. There's certainly some truth to this too. Tons of R&D went into those original pieces, and most can't deny that they're highly refined from years of iteration. You hear some variation of 90% of the watch for 10% of the price all the time, but it's never 100%, because the original is better, even if it is way more expensive. Rarity is also a sought-after attribute. Limited editions that would be otherwise priced lower are inflated because of the scarcity and low production runs. If you're looking for a great value proposition, limited editions and rare watches in the higher price brackets aren't going to give you that. You're paying a premium for a specific aesthetic that is especially appealing over the standard model. This is another benefit of the lower price tiers. Limited editions are less common there, and more affordable when they are. This all applies to unique designs within their respective category too, which are going to be priced higher as a sort of captive audience effect. Think the JLC Reverso, Christopher Ward's Bel Canto, etc. I mentioned earlier that finishing scales with the price quite well. Today's obscure reference breaks that rule though. The Casio Oceanus is perhaps the least obscure reference I've discussed so far on this channel, but I feel that this video wouldn't be complete without mentioning it. While most watches around the $300 price bracket are using printed matte dials with mostly brushed cases and trying to reduce costs as much as possible, the Oceanus is blowing them out of the water, pun intended. Starting with the dial, you're getting a great sunburst pattern that's actually a fine azurge texture, surrounded by floating indices and a raised chapter ring. The finish on the indices and hands is amazing for the price, standing up to a macro lens quite well. The case has probably the best finishing on any watch below $500, with great directional brushing on the bezel and plentiful amounts of polished beveling and facets to the case and lug design. On top of that, this has a blue sapphire crystal, which alone is an incredibly rare and interesting feature. This is a Casio, so of course it's a quartz watch. It isn't just quartz though, but solar quartz, with Bluetooth connectivity for time synchronization. Usually these sorts of features aren't appreciated as much by those among us who prefer mechanical watches. But you can't help but appreciate how well done this watch is, for the insanely low price you can get it. It isn't perfect, the bracelet is just decent and it wears a little on the larger side. But the fact that the finishing on this can even be compared to pieces 10 times the price, let alone be in contention with them, more than makes up for any downfalls it has. Casio currently sells newer versions of the Oceanus for over $1,000, which I'm sure are great too, but I don't think they're ever going to be able to top the value proposition the T200 provides. If I had to choose one price tier for the best value, it'd probably be $500. You can get watches with intent behind their design and surprisingly great finishing, features, and movements if you know where to look. Brands don't need to scrape the bottom of the barrel to sell it extremely cheap, but you still get good value in comparison to higher prices. $5,000 watches certainly experience diminishing returns, but I do believe they have the potential to be higher quality in just about every aspect over the previous tiers. Yes, you're paying a premium for brand recognition at times, but you're also paying a premium for a fantastic watch. $50 watches can be surprisingly good for their price, but compromise is the name of the game. You accept you're not getting the best, but you're getting good enough for a great price. If you're looking to maximize your value for whatever price you prefer, consider buying from a reputable microbrand. You save a ton on lack of advertising and brand name, and are often rewarded with watches punching way above their price point. And if you want more examples like that, check out my video on 15 great underrated watches, each from a different brand, that compete with industry icons at a fraction of the price. I'm interested to hear what you think in the comments. Which price tier is the best value in your opinion? Do you collect mainly watches at one price point, or do you have a variety? Let me know about any suggestions for future videos you'd like to see too. Thank you for taking the time to watch.